position of PM?
Well, I interviewed for it, but yeah. So do you mean like for PM specifically? So there are, so I would say as an entry-level like new grad, there are way less PM positions than software engineering positions. Pretty much every company will offer software engineering positions, and they have a million positions to fill. Whereas for program management, there are way less offerings, and a lot of companies don't even have that as an entry-level position. So I had a lot of like obstacles to overcome just talking to people at the career fair, being like, oh, like I really want to do PM, and they were like, okay, come back to us in 3 to 5 years. Like we don't offer that as an entry-level employee. You can become a software engineer, and maybe in a couple years you can transition over. So it's pretty much just about finding the opportunity for yourself. I personally didn't want to be a software engineer for a couple years and then switch over. So I found the companies that do offer that as an entry-level position. I studied really hard for their interviews, and then I got a couple offers.
Can you talk about your interview experiences?
Sure, yeah. So I have done a lot of different types of interviews, mainly because I've interned or interviewed at a lot of different types of companies. So you have your typical, like your stereotypical tech company, the Googles and the Facebooks and the Microsofts. And when you're interviewing for a software position, all of their interviews pretty much go the same. They are very technical interviews. You maybe have like a phone screen, which is 20 minutes talking to your recruiter, which may be behavioral. They may ask you, why you're interested in the company or what you've done thus far. They're very easy questions, however. But your primary interviews are going to be technical skills. And I guess you guys wouldn't have studied that stuff too much. I only learned all of the things in my technical interviews during like my sophomore year at MIT. But there are a lot of resources out there. Everything can be learned from a book, to be honest. I think only one of my classes at MIT actually taught material that was relevant to the interview. And I mean, of course, after the class is over, you generally forget stuff. So there are a lot of resources out there for those types of interviews. I also interned at Goldman Sachs, which I would say was a lot more behavioral heavy than technical skill heavy, which makes a lot of sense for the industry that it's in. And so for that, there's a lot of preparation as to the questions that you know the answers to, but that you may not have them off the top of your head. Like, what is your biggest strength and your biggest weakness? Talk about a time when you were working on a group project and it didn't go well at all. How did you handle the situation? Was there a happy resolution? Where do you see yourself 5 years from now? Oh, if you're in this situation where your coworker is being really belligerent, what would you do? Things like that, which I'm sure if you thought about it, you would be able to come up with a really good answer that really accurately represents yourself. But if you're on the phone during an interview setting, or if you're sitting with an interviewer, you might kind of feel on the spot and not have an answer immediately. So definitely preparing for those as well is easy because you can just Google, behavioral questions and you'll get lists, but it is important to prepare for them. And then I guess PM interviews are also a different type of interview, which also pretty much have to be studied from by the book. There are a lot of resources out there. They do have, I would say, especially when you're doing your senior year post-grad interviews, there are a lot of rounds. So one of your rounds will have a technical interview because especially at the tech companies, you're expected to be able to communicate and work with engineers. But a lot of your other rounds of interviews will be very focused on designing a product. What do you consider when you're designing a product? Who are your customers what's your market segment that you're thinking about? How many people are in that market segment and what exactly are you catering for? How would you test this product? Things like that. For example, one of my Microsoft interview questions was to design a VR app, because they're working in VR a lot now, is to design a VR app for Netflix. And I pretty much spent an hour talking to my interviewer, walking around the room, showing him what my virtual reality would look like and why I made certain design decisions and how I thought that would be a good decision for this application, etc. And I'm trying to think if there are any other. I guess if you want to go a different route, such as consulting or banking, so I've done those interviews as well. Banking I specifically haven't done, but there's, of course, studying for that. And consulting, I would say, similarly, just need to look it up. And there are a lot of resources. There are people you can call who will do case interview preparation with you. And I would say that PM interviews and consulting interviews are pretty similar in what they're asking about. Yes, a lot of questions. Vidyanti, Vidyanti, you could go first.
Oh, no, that's fine. What I wanted to ask is, what has been some failures that you've had, like something that you thought that you were never going to be able to overcome at that time? You know, something that really hit you really, really hard that you said, there's just no way I'm going to recover from this. And then
Right.
what did you do in a situation like that? How did you overcome
Sure.
some kind of really soul-crushing defeat or failure that you had?
Wow, okay, soul crushing.
No context, right? I mean, there's
No,
no-
for sure.
Unless somebody gets like a really bad health diagnosis, you know, for you or your family, it's very little, but could be worse than that. But
Right.
in the context of where you are in school or work,
Definitely.
or whatever.
Yeah. So I mean, so of course I was at MIT, which is a really like competitive school. Everyone there is very intelligent, very competitive, did well in high school, obviously, to get there, etc. And so, you know, of course me, I was like a straight A kid in high school. I've pretty much never gotten a B in my life. School was like easy for me, which is how I had time to do a lot of the other things that I did in high school. MIT is not a normal school, like, let me tell you. So I would say this is the first time in my life that I've gotten bad grades. I don't have a perfect GPA. I mean, my GPA it's good, I guess, but that was because of how I recovered from the situation. So, you know, like my freshman year, I did not do super well, and it was mainly because I think college is really different from being at home. Well, especially me, I was staying away from home for the first time. MIT is a really interesting environment. I mean, every school is different, and they kind of just throw you under the bus immediately. Like, you have homework all the time. Class is supposedly 12 units, which means it should be 12 hours total. So if you have 3 hours of lecture, that should be 3 hours of lecture and 2 hours of recitation. That should be about 7 hours of extra work every single week. Definitely not the case. You have way more than 1 hour a day. In fact, people are usually up until like 3 or 4 a.m. every single night doing work. And I mean, of course, you have to take more than one class, right? You're taking at least 4 or 5. So it's a lot of work, and it's thrown at you all at once. So that was like the first time in my life that I've probably failed at school, like not done well. And I think that was like really shocking for me because I've never been in that position before. And I personally felt like it was the end of the world. But I think it took, you know, the summer vacation basically for me to get like some space from school and get some perspective to realize that, you know, one, I'm still learning. I still learned what I needed to do. I just didn't know how to take MIT exams very well, which obviously reflected poorly on my grades. 2, I didn't really reach out to any resources. I mean, MIT is not very good at handing you resources on a silver platter, but they're there if you look for them. So I needed to sort of take it upon myself to look for what I needed. And 3, there was a way to recuperate my GPA. I mean, I take more classes, I take some easier classes to like pad my GPA, add credits, whatever, if my GPA was gonna be important to me. I mean, I'm in computer science, so it isn't as important as maybe a pre-med student, but it was important to me personally. So I would say that's probably like how I recuperated from it, but it was very shocking and like definitely crushing for me at the time because it was definitely not like super acceptable in my family or even anything that they had ever had to address with me before. That was never a situation I've been in. Yeah.
So what advice do you have about choosing a college major?
Well, I think it of course very much depends on the school you go to, but I think for one, you should definitely like use your freshman year to explore. Like try different classes. Don't just try to pick a major and do the requirements and get ahead really quickly. I know for a lot of kids that's the case in high school, but that's because high school is a very set track. Like you have classes that you have to take and you know what you need to take and you have the ability to pick and choose, right? That's not the case for college where you need to pick a major and then that has the classes that you need. So take the opportunity to figure out what you really want to be taking classes in. And like with that being said, even if you do decide a major and you know you're actually taking the real classes in your major and you decide you don't like it, like I promise you, it's honestly probably not too late to switch. A lot of schools and departments are very flexible. I've had friends who have switched into computer science their junior years and still been able to graduate on time. And I've had people who switch, you know, senior year and graduate like 1 semester later. And I promise you, those 3 to 4 months are like nothing when you think about the rest of your life and how much happier you might be in another major. Departments are really flexible about making classes you've taken fit into requirements, like, you know, being really flexible about what they can do with it so that the classes you've taken don't go to waste, which is how people can still graduate on time. So like I would highly recommend, like if you feel doubtful about what you're doing, if you don't like it, like do not put yourself through that headache, because college will suck and so will probably at least your entry-level job, because it's most likely going to be in your field. That will suck, and it becomes really hard to, you know, just switch fields because you don't have a degree in it, so you're less credible than your counterparts, etc. Yeah.
So overall, do you think college prepared you for the workforce, or do you have to go outside, like your outside experiences to be prepared?
I think it's a little bit of both. So I think college definitely gives you a really good foundation and skills and how to think. That's really what they're teaching you. They're teaching you how to think well. Whereas, you know, for example, in a software engineering job, like my internships, that's where you learn a lot about how to actually apply whatever theoretical stuff you're learning in school, however you learn how to think. So I mean, if you like actually learn what they're teaching in school, it becomes very easy to pick up these skills that are relevant to your current job, which I think college was really helpful for. But do I feel like, oh yeah, every single class I took, I directly applied to my internship? Like, of course not. So I think both experiences are really valuable. Mm-hmm.
Do you know, like, sometimes, like, we get, like, stressed out or stuff, you know, trying to figure, like, a code or trying to build something and you can't figure out, like, what do you do with those types of situations? Do you, like, step away from it? Do you go do something else in the office? Like, what do you do for that?
Yeah, so I think I have a couple ways of dealing with that. Sometimes if I feel like it's just myself getting overwhelmed. I haven't really been working on the problem for that long. It's only been a couple hours, not a couple days, and maybe I'm just like clouding my own judgment. It's super useful to take a 10 to 15 minute coffee break, right? Go to the break room or lounge, just like chill for a little bit, maybe surf Facebook on my phone, like just step away from the problem. And sometimes coming back just helps you have a clearer head, or at least helps you better formulate maybe like what questions you might have or what you don't know. But in the situations where it's been a whole day and I'm still hitting a bunch of roadblocks and I just simply don't know how to go forward, like I don't hesitate to ask questions. You have managers and mentors at whatever internship you're at, or even when you're working at an actual company, you still have people who are above you or working alongside you that you can ask questions to, and they may have information and knowledge that you don't have, so don't be scared to ask. Yes, Vidyanti?
Have you found any time you ask questions, do people ever say, that's a stupid question, why did you ask me that? Or do you see people are always willing to help? What has been your experience, and what would you like to tell the girls about any time you get stuck? What
Right.
do? Because I know naturally nobody wants to kind of go out and say anything, or ask a question or do something. So how has that helped you to be able to go out and make the reach outs?
Right. Yeah, so I mean, I personally also was very nervous to ask questions, because I mean, it means I don't know something, and especially in an internship, you want to make the best impression, you want to be able to get a return offer at the end of the summer, you want to be putting your best foot forward. So I definitely fell into that trap as well. However, I think what I realized is it's very hard to be putting your best foot forward if you can't actually get the job done. It's really hard to actually, have a really amazing finished product if you're not able to move forward, especially at an efficient and an effective pace. So once I started asking questions, it helped me move a lot faster. It helped me actually build and create faster. And I learned the things that I needed to learn, because sometimes I have the questions, but I don't actually know where to look to answer the question. And I'm sure, if I took a week to read every book that my manager gave me and explore like every website and resource that the company has, I would find the answer. But that's a week that could have been way better spent. So it is really nerve-wracking, I think, because you want to make a really good impression. But I think if you ask questions in an intelligent manner, not just, hey, I'm stuck, I don't know what I'm doing, but if you have a specific question, hey, I've tried, X, Y, and Z things, this didn't work, it gave me this error, this didn't work for this reason, and I have absolutely no idea what I should be doing next or how I can solve this bug. That shows that you actually tried and you're thinking about the problem, and I think that makes people a lot more willing to help.
Why did you choose MIT, and like what do you really like about it, and what do you not like about it so much?
Good question. Yeah, so I had a really hard decision picking where I was going to college. I was deciding between MIT and Harvard primarily. I also had a full scholarship at Duke. It was like a merit-based scholarship. So I would be part of a scholars community, and I had a lot of special resources to my disposal with that community. So I had a lot of difficult decisions. And I think for me, I ended up getting a full tuition scholarship elsewhere. So I sort of stopped thinking about Duke, mainly because I was more keen towards Harvard and MIT and being in the New England area, where there's a lot of biotech and engineering and advancements happening. And I think for me personally, it was very much about, I did a lot of research on what the schools provide. So I mean, if you just Google the schools, like Harvard, everyone knows the name, it's #1, it has, a great liberal arts education, it's known internationally. MIT is this technical institute, everyone just is an engineer, right? They have their two big pictures that everyone knows about. And I knew personally that I didn't want to just be an engineer for my entire life, I did want more than that. And so I was very torn between the two. So once I delved a little bit deeper into my own specific interests, I found out a couple things. So I found out #1, Harvard's engineering school is relatively young. It has only been around since I think 2002 or 2005 or something, which is really young, compared to MIT. So Harvard has a lot of learning to do, and I mean they do. A lot of students come to MIT to take classes, or they have online courses and they use MITx and stuff. So MIT kind of has the upper edge on that, and I wanted a very strong bachelor foundation in engineering so that I would be credible and taken seriously. The second thing I found out, of course, is that all of the research institutes are basically at MIT campus. So for even the medical students, the pre-med students at Harvard, everything that want these research opportunities, they basically have to come over to MIT. They have to take the T and they have to come over and get these research opportunities. A lot of the labs are at MIT. And it becomes harder to get these opportunities, these research positions, when they're being advertised by MIT professors and MIT staff to the MIT community, and a lot harder for you as a Harvard student, right? So that was really important to me. And I was able to do research projects at the Koch Cancer Center. I was able to do both cancer research, genetics research. I was able to do really cool stuff because I went to MIT. The third thing was that I knew that I wanted to get more into management and business later on in life, and Harvard does not offer any undergrad management majors or business majors. And even though they have one of the best business schools in the world. And that's because Harvard is primarily a graduate school. That's really what they cater to. And I mean, it makes sense and it works for them, but I really wanted the ability to at least dip my toes into management. And MIT, as an undergrad, you can take any Sloan classes. I mean, Sloan is still a top 5 MBA program. You can take any classes. I've taken literally graduate classes with MBA candidates, with Master of Finance candidates. I've worked with these professors. One of my professors works at the Harvard Law School and MIT Sloan. I got a management degree. I was able to do research at Sloan. So there are a lot of opportunities within that realm that are not available to Harvard kids. In fact, a couple of my classes have been more percentage Harvard students than MIT students. My accounting and my finance classes have a lot of Harvard cross-registrations because they just don't offer it at Harvard. So I think those are my 3 really big considerations. And I think as an undergrad, I wanted to be able to have strong foundations in those things. So while Harvard gave me, they do have a lot of resources to their disposal, the specific ones I was interested in were just better at MIT. But it took a lot of research to get there. I did a lot of reading through the websites and thinking about what was important to me and stuff. Mm-hmm.
What was something that you were told no about, and how did you let that stop you, or did you find another way to make it happen?
It's funny because when you asked that question, I thought of something completely non-career related. My answer was piercing my nose, but that has nothing to do with what?
What's about that?
Piercing my nose?
I really want to hear about it.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely.
Are you serious, Auntie? Are you having problems? Does Anjali want her nose pierced?
No.
Oh.
But what that's going to show is another side of, you know.
I mean,
the
I wanted-
non-work side. the
I wanted
non-school
mine
side.
pierced.
Me
I
too.
wanted like I wanted both sides, and my mom told me she would do one. And
Oh.
I told her I wanted both, and she said I couldn't
It's
have
both or
both.
nothing.
She
Yeah.
told me I could have one, and she said I had to until I turned 18 in the other one.
I'm
So
more like accepting.
Oh my gosh.
Nose ring.
Yeah.
And people was like, "Are you really gonna get one?" I was like, "No." My dad was like, "I could only get like probably another ear piercing."
I mean, sure, I could talk about that. I mean, so I recently got both my nose and my belly pierced, but you don't know about my belly piercing, I don't think, Auntie. But oh, did you see it? Oh, my pictures?
On Facebook.
Oh, okay. I mean, obviously my mom isn't super thrilled, I'm sure you can imagine. Yeah, so I wanted my nose pierced since like high school, which is like 8 years ago for me. And basically my mom constantly just said no. And so I think originally I didn't handle it very well because obviously I was like still in high school. I was very much a kid and I just like got really mad and angry about it. But I think as I got older, I took negotiation classes at MIT. I mean, and just generally I think learning and growing up, I think it becomes really important to get to like the bottom issue, because I don't think it's actually my mom has a like value against piercings. So like I don't think my mom holds a true, you know, hatred towards this. I think there is like an underlying issue, right? So asking the question why and really getting to the root of issues is really important. I mean, and I think that really helped. I think especially approaching it more maturely. My mom surprised me last year and took me to get it pierced, which like I really liked, because I didn't want to just like even though I'm old enough to get a piercing by myself, I did want her to be more okay with it because it's going to be on my face for like the rest of my life. But yeah, I think like huge part of growing up is learning how to communicate well, especially even with your parents, because even though I'm still like the child, I guess, in the house, being able to approach things more maturely definitely gives me credibility in the household. Even though I don't do it all the time, it's still a learning process. Yeah.
I guess what are like some things you learn? I guess with jobs, you know, having piercings and tattoos, like are there any things that you saw
Sure.
like, that would affect it? I guess.
Not really. I mean, the tech world is really liberal, I will say. So you have way less of a barrier there. I mean, people have tattoos, people have piercings, people do pretty much whatever they want. And especially as a programmer, that's a lot more the case. But I mean, like I do want to go into management, so that sort of is a bit different for me. I mean, and I've worked at Goldman Sachs where your image is very, very important. I mean, there you have a strict dress code. I literally had to buy a new wardrobe for that job. And in that case, I think, well, for one, I think as an Indian woman, I do have a little bit of like the culture thing working for me with a nose piercing. I think people don't question it as much. And I think it is important to make sure that like, okay, so for example, I have like my belly pierced, which is definitely not a cultural thing in the slightest. I mean, I should not be showing that off at work. Like, no one should really know unless they see it when they are like outside of work on the weekends with me for whatever reason, that like at the pool, right? No, like that's not something that they should know. So I think it's very important to just make sure that whatever jewelry or accessories that you may have is not distracting. Like people should, like when they look at you, that's not what they should be looking at. And I think that goes for like anything, like that goes for dress code as well, etc. Because I mean, like you can get certain things if you dress a certain type of way, right? Like things can work both to and against like your advantage. But is that really the reason that you want to be, you know, moving ahead? Like, is that really what you want people to be associating you with? Or do you want them to associate with your actual intellect and the way that you're handling situations and what you as a person are bringing to the table? I think is the important thing to remember. Mm-hmm.
So what do you do when you're not working?
When I'm not working. So, I mean, I've been dancing for a really long time, so I dance a lot. I do a lot of like various volunteer and outreach work. So right now I'm working with like this national organization that works with women in tech, and I'm helping plan their conference for the year. I have a couple of my own side projects. I mean, like I'll tutor and stuff. During some of my internships, I've gone to elementary and middle schools and done a like tutoring and dance type of workshop every week. So I do a lot of that type of stuff. I take dance classes myself. I mean, I hang out, yeah.
Do you want to talk about the project you're getting ready to do in India?
Sure. Yeah. So.
That'll be something completely different, a different side.
Yeah, true. So most schools, of course, have like international travel departments, and so I got a grant to study performing arts in India for a month this summer, which is really cool, especially at MIT. So I'm going to be in India for a month, and I'll be basically living and breathing Indian classical dance. I'll be meeting with the teacher basically every day and studying with her day and night, and hopefully performing in a couple programs at the end of the summer. And I mean, I'll be in an area where there's a lot of culture, so she'll be taking me to a lot of like the temples in the area, learning a lot about my culture, etc. While I'm there, I'm actually jointly going to be working on this service project that I'm doing, which is, it's women related, but it's more like women and like menstrual health, so women's health basically. And essentially what I'll be doing, I've received like a grant to get like sanitary products for women, because it's a lot less like open of a culture in India for those types of things, and I'll be taking them to women's centers where people don't really have the resources for it, and I'll be leading a couple workshops to actually educate them on like health and sanitation around this, because a lot of times people just are not educated. They're really taught basically to just do everything behind closed doors. It's something they should be more ashamed of. So that's also something I'm going to be working on at the same time. Yes.
The situation with your two good friends where you had a project and they were doing the work, I'd like to hear specifically how you addressed it and how it was resolved, if it was resolved.
Sure. Yeah, so I would say that this is one of those situations that didn't have as happy of a resolution as I would like. I mean, it definitely didn't affect our friendships, I would say, but in terms of like working in a group project setting again, it probably wouldn't happen. So initially, I think I did take the more passive approach, because I didn't really want to be like, I didn't want to cause a problem, basically. Like, I didn't want to be creating drama within this group for seemingly no reason. And I thought that part of it was just like my fault. I thought I was confused about maybe the situation. So the first way that I addressed it was kind of to just like make sure that everyone was on the same page. So, we met up and I was like, hey guys, I thought I was supposed to be working on this, but it seems like part of it is already done, so am I missing something here? Or did you guys have a different timeline in mind and you didn't let me know? Or like, what's happening? So I kind of put the blame on myself, which I think was a positive way to go, because it's a lot less, it causes people to be a lot less defensive, because they don't feel like you're pinning the blame on them and they feel the need to be defensive. So of course at that point I got just like a slew of excuses from them, like, oh, well, we figured you had a really heavy workload, so we would like take some of the burden off of you, or, we had extra time, and oh, we were just hanging out downstairs together, so we thought we would work on it together. And at that point, it's where I can ask questions, oh, you guys were together, you could have texted me, I would have loved to meet up and work on it as well. Oh no, I don't have a heavy workload. Like, what made you think that? Did you think I should be working on it more than I am already? And I was very much able to like put my interests on the table, which was, hey guys, like I know that you guys just want to get this project, because what I realized is that they just wanted to finish the project. We all were going to get an A in the class, basically regardless, is what we realized after a lot of our grades came in around that time, because it was a final project. And so for them, it was just, we want to finish this and get it out of the way. Like, we just want to chill. And like, while I understand that and I respect it, and I mean, I've wanted to do that in other classes before as well, they weren't really respecting the fact that I actually wanted to learn the concepts that the project was teaching, because it was very like related to what my summer internship was going to be. So I had a vested interest in learning this stuff. So I kind of, told them, hey, I actually want to learn this stuff, so can I at least work on my part? And if, it gets too close to the deadline and you want to help me out, at that point we can rediscuss, right? And I think that enlightened them at least to like what my interests were. I won't say that it made them completely understanding and that they like got off of my part of the project, but at least at that point, because I knew what they were doing, I was able to sort of save my own stuff locally and work on it at my pace. And I let them do whatever they wanted, which is fine, but I also was able to do my own learning on the side. So I created my own solution, I guess, to the problem.
So you do a lot with dance, like performing arts. What made you decide that that's not what you were going to do with your life?
Well, so I have had the opportunities, I guess, to actually pursue that, like more majorly than I have. But I think I personally realized that my own interest and potential was a bit larger than like just doing dance or performing arts. I wanted to be able to impact and affect more people and humanity more generally. And while I think that, you know, performing arts is a medium through which you can do that, I think that having an education and being able to do it through other mediums as well has really helped me branch out my own thinking and my own problem solving capabilities. So I just wanted to be, I guess I didn't want to leave any doors closed.
This is going to be your last question.
Yes. Make it good. And then when he says we're wrapped up, you can go ask her anything you want after.
Yeah, I don't have really anything to do, so.
Stevie, did you have a question?
Yeah, did I miss anyone?
I think Stevie had a question.
I did not have a question.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you have a question.
I think you have a question.
Wow.
You have a
Or
question.
Stevie, maybe you could tell her something that you found to be really interesting.
Wow, okay. I thought it was interesting that you interned at Google.
Thanks.
You had slides. You had slides.
They do. They have a lot of fun stuff there. It's basically,
Slides,
yeah.
I was gonna ask you that. I was
Sure.
like, is that true that like some workspaces are like basically a big old playground for technology people? Like,
Yeah.
'cause-
I would say Google is basically college part 2. It's basically a big university. We actually kind of make fun of it there because I mean, like, you have like a medical center on site and you have food provided to you in cafeterias and snacks and coffee machines, and like everything is handed to you basically. So we joke around that it's basically a big college campus, but I will say that there is a lot of fun stuff at Google and Facebook, et cetera, some more so than others. Like I would say there's a lot more fun and games at Facebook than Google, but people also still really get their work done, and I think it's just because it's passionate about what they're working on. I mean, if you're not passionate about what you're doing, then of course you're gonna sit around on like a playground and go on slides all day, but if you are passionate about what you're doing, then you wanna do it, so.
So, I have one more.
Sure.
I was reading an article that was saying that Google is sort of, in particular, is sort of changing their hiring policy because they were hiring people from, you know, all like first year universities. But what they found was that a lot of times people were so like intent on being the like best person in the room that they lacked collaboration skills and creative problem-solving skills.
So
did you find that to be the case, or no?
So it's really interesting because, so Google specifically, at least, for their freshmen and sophomores, their internship program is a freshman and sophomore program. And I mean, it's for a couple of reasons. So one, it's so that you can work on a project more geared towards your education level, right? You haven't learned all the skills that you need to be doing these, you know, big projects. But the second thing that they do, which is really interesting, is they pair you with a partner. So you and another intern are working on the project together. You have one project and you split it up however you may, but you have 2 managers and there are 2 interns and you have to work together. And I think they do that for that exact reason. So, you know, my first internship at Google was my sophomore year, where I was part of that program, and I had an intern partner, and he was like very difficult to work with. You couldn't collaborate with him, you couldn't speak to him, he didn't communicate well at all. I mean, and I wasn't the only one who realized it. Like, my own managers saw it and realized it, and it was like stressful for all of us because we had to all pick up the slack for his part of the project as well, because the stuff they give you to work on at these companies is important for them as well. Like they need those things as well. And I mean, and he didn't get a return offer for the next summer. And I think, you know, it's because you couldn't really work with him. He may have been intelligent and a good coder, but that's not really all that's important. So I think, you know, that's part of the reason why they have programs like that.
Did you love coding when you first started? I'm going rogue.
It's okay. So I personally don't, which is probably not the right answer for this forum, but I figure. Yeah, I personally don't love coding. It's definitely not what I'm like most passionate about, which is exactly the reason why I'm not going to be a software engineer in the fall or in the future. I wanted to learn it, and I wanted the really solid foundation because I think it's a really important skill. And I think that learning it in an environment like college is different than doing coding BAT and learning how to code. Because I mean, like, you can pick up a coding language anywhere and the syntax that you need, and you can hack around and make things work at the end of the day. But that's very different than actually truly knowing what's happening with your code or how to actually put code together well. And so having that foundation was very important to me because code is such an integral part of like everything happening today. And so understanding that and being able to communicate towards that is important, especially I think as a woman in tech, like being able to assert that I know my stuff is important. But do I see myself coding, 10 years from now? Absolutely not. I hope to be able to take a more like big picture approach and actually orchestrate what's happening there.
Something to that, especially for the empowered girls. Just because you're here for 7 weeks trying to learn how to code, the expectation is not that you all are going to go off and study computer science or become coders or anything in that realm. I think the purpose is to understand the discipline and the rigor of coding. It's not so much that you're going to take the skills of the actual coding language itself with you, but it's the process of learning how to code, because what you're doing is you're really kind of taking a problem and you're kind of breaking it up into smaller pieces, and you're trying to say, okay, now I'm going to make this thing work, and then the next thing, and then the next thing, and the next thing, and really kind of help you understand and realize that, first of all, this is not that difficult, right? If somebody really, really, really wanted to do it, resources are available and you can do it. But also, more importantly, if you can put yourself to a program where you're sitting and learning something that's kind of difficult, and you're putting yourself through it, and you're learning, and you're coming up with an end product, if you can do this, really, you can kind of do anything. So even if you don't all walk out of here, become computer science majors, or go to work in a tech company, every single thing that you're doing as part of the process will kind of help you. And that's the goal for the whole program. And
I totally agree.
You all know I didn't go to school, I didn't go to MIT. First of all, I didn't take computer science classes, but I took some programming classes, and I learned a lot of it on my own, and it really helped me just think about a problem from the top down and say, okay, what's next? And it goes through the very analytical process that you just kind of subject your brain to, just kind of to train your brain not to look at the problem and try to run away from it, but to say, okay, let me break it down into its parts and see how much of it I can solve piece by piece. And that goes for life, not just for work or school or anything. Same thing at home or in your life.
I mean, to add to that, I think that's like number one, a huge point. I think my CS education has really just taught me how to think. I mean, people joke around where you can like find everything on Stack Overflow, and that's because once you have a small enough problem that you can, Google it and find it on Stack Overflow, like how you got there is really what's important. It's solving the problem, the way you think about it. And I recommend, like, if you don't want to major in computer science, like, you shouldn't. I mean, I personally wish I had minored, but MIT just added the minor last year, so it wasn't really in my time. But I mean, like, you can minor in it, which is like so much less of a commitment there. Or just take the classes that computer science majors will recommend are important for interviews or internships or whatever, and you can list those on your resume. You can speak towards them in an interview, so you can tell them that, hey, I'm really passionate about this and I wanted to learn more about it, that's why it's my major, but I can do XYZ things. I took these classes, so I'm definitely like competent and capable of doing the job. So there are a lot of ways to do kind of everything that you're passionate about. Any other questions, I guess? Last minute questions?
Okay, so you spoke about your internship, I think it was with the Krusty Place, where you were expected, I think you said you didn't have the skill, or like you didn't know how to do something. It was like coding or something, or that you didn't know how to do.
The story I said at the beginning?
Yes.
Yeah. Wait.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
So, when you were hired, did they know that you didn't know how to do this?
Are we talking about the story that, like I said, I was...
I may be combining.
Okay, I feel like you are.
Someplace you interviewed and then you went into the job and then you said like you didn't know, but maybe I misunderstood that as well.
So the story said at the beginning, it was more, I was expecting a certain environment.
Yes.
That was not the case. I didn't have that environment. But I mean, I can of course speak to, not knowing how to do the job, because that happens in like all internships, especially as a college kid. Yeah, so interviewing is very different than your internship and what you do on the job. I will say that. So in fact, they're pretty much like not correlated at all. So in your interview, right, like as I said, you can just take a book or whatever, but there are like specific types of questions they may ask you. They'll ask you to, they'll ask you to do like a recursion. I don't know if you guys know these words, but like there are different types of problems basically in different categories that they'll ask you to solve, right? So they may be like, oh, you're given a list of strings of letters with both capital and lowercase letters. We want you to sort these letters in alphabetical order and return that to us in a string. How would you do that? Walk us through like how your code would work, what the runtime, so how long your code would take, and then write some pseudocode up on the board, right? So of course I'll be like, oh, I'm going to use this sorting algorithm, and this is how long it takes in a list of size n, right? And it takes this much time, and then here's my pseudocode. So you do that. I promise you, you're most likely not going to be doing that on the job. In fact, I promise you that someone at whatever company you're working at has written a function that anyone at the company can use, right? Because it's so basic. So your interview is definitely not what your internship is going to be. So I would say almost everything you're doing at your internship is learning on the job. And I think handling that, as I spoke to earlier, is best done by firstly, like taking advantage of your resources given at the company, and secondly, asking questions. So at a company when you start as an intern, there are like FAQ guides, and they will give you, your manager will usually give you like a couple books to introduce you to whatever language you're working on, and you'll have design documents which basically teach you about the various frameworks that you're working on or parts of the company code that you're working in. So like you should read those because you'll get really educated on what you're working on. A lot of times most of it will go over your head and you won't understand it, but that's where you can kind of write down the questions that you have about the different parts, and you can go to your manager and be like, hey, I was working through this and I don't know what it's talking about. Can you explain this further to me or show me how it works or whatever? And it shows a ton of initiative on your part. It shows that you're actually interested in what's going on and interested in understanding it. And I think that really helps, your manager be like, oh, like, this is an intern who's willing to work hard and get the job done. And it helps out a lot.
All right, well, let's give Sravya a nice big round of applause.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Shavia.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So today, the person speaking to you is my sister. She just graduated from MIT, studying computer science, and she's going to be working at Microsoft this fall out in Seattle. So she has a lot of experiences that everyone here can learn from, and she's considerably one of the most intelligent and hardest-working people I know, which is something she doesn't like to agree with.
That's news.
Being humble her, but you guys are gonna learn a lot from her. So hope you guys enjoy.
Thank you. Thanks. Yeah, so I'm actually really excited to be here today. Back in my day, which was like only 8 years ago, there weren't really programs like this for like, women empowerment and like women in technology and computer science. So my high school programs were pretty much me among a bunch of like dudes who had been coding, since they were like little boys. So this is really cool and exciting, and it shows how far we've come in just a couple of years. So that's really awesome. But yeah, so as the song said, I majored in computer science and management at MIT, and I'll be at Microsoft as a program manager in the fall, and I'll talk a little bit more about what that role specifically means in a little bit. But I figured before I talk about my experiences to get to this point, I would open with like a short story, I guess, about one of my internship experiences. So throughout MIT, right, you have like every summer, and we have this, we have an opportunity every January to also do internships for a month. So there are a lot of opportunities to get work experience in different roles in different industries. So I've interned at a lot of different companies. Some of the big ones are, you know, like Google, Intel, Goldman Sachs. I mean, I've interviewed with a ton of those companies and, like, you know, gotten offers, Facebook, Microsoft, etc. As well as some smaller and more mid-sized companies with, you know, different roles that you don't usually get at the bigger ones. And so at one of these really big companies that I guess would be really prestigious for a computer science student to get an offer at, I was lucky enough to receive an offer one of my summers. And I was obviously really excited. I was humbled. I was super pumped for the work benefits. You know, there are all the perks of working at these big companies. There's like inclusion and diversity. You get paid a ton, and you're paid the same as all the other interns. So I was really excited, especially compared to some of my prior smaller internships before that. And, you know, I was like bragging to my friends and family back home about this. I was really excited. So I step into my internship on day one, and I'm this very like bubbly, talkative, like short Indian girl. I dress, well, probably like more extra than this, than like right now, most of my clothes are packed, but very like, in the summer especially, summer dresses and skirts and stuff. So I'm probably not your typical like programmer look. And I walk into the office on the first day, and I was really shocked, actually. So my entire team was composed of like middle to upper aged white males, which I guess I should have been expecting, and I'd experienced previously at smaller companies that don't really have these big diversity pushes, but I wasn't expecting it at this internship. So, you know, I was a little bit shocked, but I was like, whatever, I'm sure, you know, this is just my team. I'm sure the rest of the floor, probably like there are girls walking around, there's more diversity, whatever. So 3 weeks of my internship passed, and I definitely scoped out the scene, and it's safe to say that the bathroom was pretty much my bathroom. I did not like see any females anywhere, and so my building basically would encompass like the entire upper group that I was in, which was like the cloud team, and my immediate team is the 5 people that I would sit in a room with. And so I had seen pretty much no other girls, and I saw maybe 2 males of a different gender. I mean, not gender, sorry, race, like ethnicity. One Asian and one Indian, right? So everyone else was pretty much the same. Hi, Auntie. Hi. How are you doing?
Good, how are you?
I'm good, I'm good. But anyway, so yeah, so 3 weeks had passed, and I hadn't really seen any difference. So I was like, wow, this is not what I was expecting. Then shock number 2 came around. I was talking to someone who was very closely related to my immediate team about my project. And my project was to work on this web interface. Basically, for the entirety of the company, I was distributing and configuring data, and I was creating this portal for them to view it on. So there was definitely a little bit of back-end work sort of to like feed and channel all this data through, but I was doing a ton of front end to display it in a pretty manner so all teams across the entire company could understand it. And this was a project I'd never done before in languages I never used before, and I hadn't taken a class at MIT yet or anything that had introduced me to it. So I was really excited. And so I was talking to someone on a related team. He was one of the managers about my project, and obviously I was very enthusiastic about it. And he basically told me to dial it down a little bit because web projects and front-end projects are like female projects. They're stereotypically for girls, and they're easy. It's because they're easier than like the more hardcore back-end stuff. So I was like, wow, okay. I was also not expecting, you know, someone to say that to me, especially because obviously I had never worked on it before, so it wasn't very stereotypical for me. So that was my second shock. The third and final, I guess, shock of this internship was when one day I walked into the office, and I was probably more dressed down than I usually am. I was wearing jeans and like a plaid like button-down shirt versus my usual summer dresses and everything. And when you're working at like a tech company, especially as a software engineer, you can pretty much dress however you want, especially in like Silicon Valley. So it's whatever you're comfortable with. For a lot of programmers, that's t-shirts and jeans or hoodies, but it's pretty much whatever you want. So for me, I'm most comfortable in like more girly clothes, I guess. So so I was dressed down that day, and my manager came over, and the reason was just because I hadn't done my laundry yet. And my manager came over, and he was like, "Hey, is everything okay?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, like, why would you think it isn't? I'm like fine, like nothing has happened such that you would think I'm upset or sad about anything." And he was just like, "Oh, well, you just look like a normal programmer today." So I was like, "Oh, what's up?" And I was like, "What do you mean a normal programmer? Like, do I not look like a programmer every other day that I'm sitting at the computer doing my work?" So I was pretty shocked, pretty upset, and uncomfortable with my environment and my circumstance. And I guess it definitely like slowed down my momentum and my enthusiasm to be doing work. So it definitely affected part of my summer and my internship, but probably halfway to 3/4 of the way through, I realized that I'm not really helping anyone by moping about it at home and being really dejected about my situation. And I'm pretty much only hurting myself. So, I kind of picked back a little bit of my own like self-respect and momentum. I obviously wanted to finish the project strong, and I made it through. But that was probably the first very like obvious experience that I had with the problems of diversity and inclusion in this field. So it was definitely really shocking to me. And the reason that I was able to even pick myself up so quickly is because of the path that I've had to that internship and all of the experiences that I've had. So to go back now to my experiences up until this point. Throughout elementary and middle and high school, I pretty much was a very diverse kid. I did a lot of different things. I did dance and piano, a lot of performing arts. I was involved with like the school newspaper and plays. I did speech and debate. I also did, science research projects. I did computer science programs. So I basically tried everything and, just dabbled in a lot of stuff. And while, of course, that's not very focused in my interests, I think that it's given me a lot of skills with working with people that I carry with me today. So, with each of these diverse groups, whether it be dancers or programmers or scientists, they all have a different way of working. They all have their own niche communication and collaboration styles. And that's something that is really hard to teach to someone. It's very much learned through experience. And learning about these different people and how to work with them has been hugely useful for me throughout my career. So walking into MIT, I was still, faced with the same problem as to what do I want to major in, what do I want to do with the rest of my life. And I realized that, in all the different activities and endeavors that I had pursued up until that point, every single group basically has problems that need to be solved, and that's essentially what we were doing, whether it be a research project or it be a computer algorithm that I'm working on, or whether it's a speech and debate competition, right? We're all working towards solving some sort of goal. So I realized I want to solve problems. That was my overarching goal. So my freshman year at MIT, I tried a lot of different things. I did, biology and genetics. I did research projects in that area. I tried out a bunch of different humanities, sorry, we call it HAS at MIT, a lot of different humanities fields. I tried, computer science. And what I realized in the various classes that I took and the research projects that I worked on is that all of the advancements and breakthroughs and new inventions that were being made in all of these fields had some sort of technology and computer science backing it. That was very much a part of the backbone. And so I realized that in today's day and age, if I want to be able to work in like any field and solve problems in anything that might interest me, whether it be finance or technology itself or biology and genetics or whatever, computer science and that technology background is super vital. So I decided to major in computer science. During some of my internships throughout MIT, I realized that while I love working on these discrete blocks of problems and piecing them all together to have this final product at the end of the summer, I really missed this collaboration with people that I had been doing my entire life. I love working with people, I love working together, and that was something I really missed. So I picked up my management degree at MIT, and I sort of was able to marry my two passions while doing that. So it was around this time that, one, I realized that I might want to go into PM work, which led me to my post-grad plans at Microsoft. And 2, I had my internship experience that I just told you guys about. So I got a little bit more involved in more social endeavors at MIT. I got involved with the computer science department and doing a lot of outreach for the women in our department and making it more inclusive, whether that be, you know, lounges just for women and creating those spaces for us, or whether it be special classes that really open your eyes to the more practical things that you don't usually learn in school or in theoretical classes. I got involved more generally with the administration at MIT, working in just generally women empowerment at the Institute. And I'm carrying that forward with me. I really enjoyed working on it. And I started looking into PM stuff. So that led me to Microsoft, obviously, where I'm gonna be a programmer product manager. And basically what that role specifically means is we're essentially the middleman for everything. So when you have a project that you're working on, it's usually a specific product or a feature of that product, and you're trying to reach some goal with it. So as a PM, we're in charge of timelining that entire project. We're in charge of figuring out what the design specifications are for it, what we want it to look like, feel like, whatever it might be. And we work with people to do that, right? We work with the designers. We are in charge of figuring out what technologies we want to use to do it, how we want to actually implement it, and we work with the engineers and the software engineers to be doing that. And you know, once we have a product built and we have something that we can actually play with, we go to data analysts and we say, okay, we want to do user testing. How do we want to user test this? What is the data that we're getting back? What improvements can we make, etc. So we're very much looking at the big picture, and we get to work on a project from start to finish. And we get to work with all these different types of people and groups to do it, which is pretty much exactly what I'm passionate about. So yeah, so that's pretty much me and my story up until now. And I'm of course happy to talk about anything more specifically that might interest you, whether it be, you know, my interview experiences at the different types of companies, or my internship experiences, or what I did in high school, or whatever is interesting for you guys. But yeah. Yes.
So what did your internships consist of at the other companies?
So I've done a couple types of internships. I've done data analytics. I've done software engineering. So I would say, especially in college, as a computer science major, software engineering is one of the most common types of internships, and probably the most general. So you get, you have different types of projects within that. You could be working on back end or front end or full stack, or cloud or machine learning or NLP. That's very general. There's program management, of course, doing the PM stuff. I would say those are the big types of internship roles. Yes, Sasank?
When we're discussing, software engineering field, just for everyone, could you describe, what exactly front end, back end, and all those mean to everyone?
Sure. So it's basically so front end is sort of the user-facing stuff. So whatever you're looking at, for example, when you're on Facebook, what you're looking at, how this website works for you, how it intuitively, to click on your notifications and how they pop up and things like that is all the front end stuff. So it's very much the user interface and experience. Whereas back end is everything that's going on behind the scenes that you don't know about. So, how your data is being stored on Facebook, like where your friends are stored in whatever servers they have, and how they're going through them when you decide to search for a friend or whatever it might be. And full stack is sort of in the middle. It's, I guess, the entire range, the entire spectrum. It's not exactly working on the user experience, but it's a little bit higher than just all this data mass.
How old was you when you first started coding?
So my first coding experience was probably in 9th grade in high school. So, no, or the summer before 9th grade. That's 9th grade, pretty much. Yeah, I did a summer program at Carnegie Mellon University, which was my first experience coding, and I learned Java, and basically I learned all of the basics of it, and I did a project, and it was very handheld, because for me personally, because I had never coded before. There were other people in the program. In fact, it was So it was funny because I opened talking about how it was really cool that this is a women's program. So they were very excited that year because it was the most women they'd ever had in the program, and there were 5 of us. And the program was like much larger than this. It was probably 30 to 40 people. So, and they were very excited about this, that they even got more than 2. But anyway, so I never coded before, so it was very handheld for me. And then that following fall at school, I took AP Computer Science. So I just did more Java coding. Oh, yeah?
Oh, do you think being like young and being a woman and being a manager is gonna like offer obstacles for stuff?
I think it possibly could. I think as a girl, or like as a woman, I guess, it's harder to be taken more seriously, and your communication style and management style definitely has to be different than what your male counterparts may do. And I know that's frustrating for a lot of women, especially, you know, at MIT, which is a very liberal environment. People are very used to everything being the exact same, whether you're, you know, a man or a woman or whatever your sexuality or your race is. It like doesn't matter to people there, but that's not really how it works in the real world. People are different and they view things differently. So I think like finding a woman mentor will be very important to me, and I definitely won't be able to just emulate my male counterparts. And I think it'll definitely be a huge learning experience to figure out, you know, what people respond well to or not. Anjali?
So you have a personality, and a lot of people would assume that a girl who is really intelligent or a girl who is interested in computer science wouldn't necessarily have the personality that you do. How do you think that your personality has helped you or hurt you with your experiences this far? Like a helpful personality? Yeah, and just...
Yeah, that's what she means. Yeah, okay, so I think that's a great question, and it's something I'm pretty passionate about. I think that, especially what I've observed at MIT and with some of my younger friends, it becomes really hard for people to stay motivated and staying in tech if they don't really fit the like programmer look, you know? And obviously I don't really fit that look. But yeah, I think it has both helped and hurt me. So for one, I think it's helped me because I fit in that diversity model, right? When someone looks at me and they see that, oh, I went to MIT, oh, I studied computer science, I'm clearly capable of passing my interviews, and I don't look like your stereotypical programmer, wow, this is like something different, right? So it's definitely helped me in that regard. But I think it also has hurt me, especially I think when it comes to peer relationships. So it's harder to be taken seriously when people don't just look at you and are able to automatically assume that you're smart, especially in an environment where you have other smart people around you. So, you know, of course at MIT, in my computer science classes, everyone is intelligent. I mean, everyone is capable, everyone is taking the class together. And especially in group projects, or if you are working on homework and you do need help, I mean, that happens to everyone, it can be very hard to actually rely on your friends. And I personally have experienced this both with, I guess, some of my nerdier girlfriends and all of my guy friends, basically. But it's very easy for them to dismiss you or to like immediately categorize you as ditzy or, you know, like dumb, pretty much, just because you have a moment of weakness or because you don't really fit this model that they're expecting. Like, you're not like the rest of them.
So how do you overcome that?
So I think, well, I guess there are a couple ways, and it depends on the situation. So, you know, for example, there are working in group environments and projects where it is very important for you to be able to have ownership on what you're working on, and it's important for you to not really be shoved under the door. So for example, I had an experience in one of my classes where we had divvied up a project equally between the 3 of us. It was me and 2 of my like closest guy friends. We were on the same dance group, so we spent pretty much every other day together for hours on end. We knew each other very well, and we all thought this was going to be an easy, great experience. But I think that's because they figured that I would be very easy to just push off to the side and for them to finish the project themselves, and I thought it was because we got along well. So the project started, and we, you know, had a conversation to divvy up the project in 3 parts, and you know, we're all taking different classes otherwise, so we have different schedules for homework. So when I like logged on to Git to see what the status of the code was for our project and for me to work on my part, I saw that, and you know, it wasn't like I pushed it off or procrastinated or anything. It was like 2 days later, and I looked at it, and half of my part of the project was pretty much done. And of course that was very confusing to me because I was wondering why someone was touching what was supposedly my code. And so, you know, that's like one type of scenario where people just think they can walk all over you. And I think that that's something that you just have to be aggressive, but or you shouldn't be aggressive, but you should be like aggressive enough to address it, but you should address it in a calm and composed manner. Because I mean, being aggressive in the manner that you handle it obviously isn't going to help anyone. And I think that it is really important, however, for you to address it because it kind of shows them that you can't be walked all over. But when it comes to like other relationships, like just friendships where, you know, people are rude to you or don't really acknowledge that you have a place being there as well, which has also happened to me. I think for one, I think, you know, you can't just fix everyone, especially overnight. So I think it's just worth it for you to kind of catalog that away and be like, okay, well, I guess he's not as good of a friend as I thought he was because clearly he doesn't like see me for my value and my merit. And I think it's important to instead surround yourself by people who do see that value and merit because it's only gonna hurt you to be with a bunch of people who are not really boosting your own like self-esteem and self-respect because that's only gonna reflect on yourself. You're gonna start reflecting the opinions around you. But yeah. I think, yeah, you had a question.
How did you